If you've looked into Cold War history at any point, then I'm sure you know that Hungary was a member of the Warsaw Pact and a communist nation during the Cold War. But unlike every other member of the Warsaw Pact, this wasn't the first time Hungary was communist. Because for 5 months in 1919, after the end of World War I, there was a short-lived country known as the Hungarian Soviet Republic. In this video, we're going to be looking at the history of this short-lived state, how it came to exist, and why it only lasted 5 months. The year is 1919, and Austria-Hungary is no more. The Central Powers had just lost the Great War, but the Treaty of Versailles hadn't been signed at this point. In fact, none of the post-war treaties existed yet. The only thing that did exist for the defeated nations was chaos and confusion. The de facto borders of Central and Eastern Europe in March of 1919 were constantly changing, because every recognised and unrecognised nation was at war with each other. Right after the war to end all wars just ended.
Ironic.
Of course, this is a generalisation of what's happening, but the point is that the start of the interwar period was hectic, especially in these regions. The former lands of the Habsburg monarchy had broken up into several ethno-states. Officially, the biggest of these countries was the First Hungarian Republic. I say officially because Hungary was in conflict with Romania, Czechoslovakia and Serbia. The armies of these countries had taken large amounts of territory and had helped to seriously undermine the legitimacy of the democratic government that was under the presidency of... Mihai Karolyi. This, alongside the government's inability to handle other post-war crises, would soon encourage the socialists and communists of Hungary to make their move. On the 13th of November 1918, France and Serbia negotiated an armistice with Hungary that set up a demarcation line that all Hungarian forces had to retreat north of, so Entente forces could move in and occupy the land south of the line. Unfortunately for the Hungarians, a note sent by French delegate and Lieutenant Colonel Fernand Vix on the 20th of March 1919 notified the Hungarian government that the Entente wished to make the Hungarian forces evacuate beyond the demarcation line and retreat to this line here. This was unacceptable for Hungarian Prime Minister Denis Berinki and his cabinet, who decided to resign on the same day. After this, Karolyi appointed a new cabinet with members of the Social Democratic Party, since they were the only party that could form a government. What he didn't know was that he had just accidentally sworn in a communist government. He didn't know that just before the new government was sworn in, radical members of the Social Democrats agreed to merge with the Hungarian Communist Party to form a new coalition. The Communist Party was led by a man named Bela Kun. He was a Jewish Hungarian socialist who had been an unsuccessful journalist and a trade union official before he was mobilized into the Austro-Hungarian army at the outbreak of World War I. He became a prisoner of war in Russia in 1916, but he later joined the Bolsheviks. This attracted the attention of Vladimir Lenin, who after the Bolshevik Revolution allowed him to organize a central committee full of Hungarian POWs and communist sympathizers. This committee began to set the foundations for a communist presence in Hungary. After the collapse of the Central Powers in November 1918, he returned to Hungary, started a communist newspaper and founded the Hungarian Communist Party on December 20th. Although he was imprisoned in February 1919 by the Republican government, Kun was allowed to continue directing the party from his cell. His party promised that if given power, he would secure Soviet aid against Romanian forces that were occupying parts of Hungary and restore Hungary's pre-war borders. On March 20th, 1919, Kun was released by Karolyi just in time to form the new government. The next day, the Communist/Social Democratic coalition abolished the First Republic and formed a revolutionary governing council before forcing the resignation of the president. The Hungarian Soviet Republic was born. The Communists wrote a temporary constitution guaranteeing freedom of speech and assembly, free education, language and cultural rights to minorities, and other rights. Single list elections took place in April, but members of the parliament were selected indirectly by popularly elected committees. On June 25th, Kun's government proclaimed a dictatorship of the proletariat, and he nationalised industrial and commercial enterprises and socialised housing, transport, banking, medicine, cultural institutions, and all land holdings of more than 40.5 hectares. This move alienated the peasantry, who thought this land was to be distributed to them instead of being taken by the state. Instead of the land reform that they had hoped for, they now faced the prospect of farming for the state, which would ultimately cause food supply to break down in the future. Kun undertook these measures even though the Hungarian communists were relatively few in their number, and the support they enjoyed was based far more on their program to restore Hungary's borders than on their revolutionary agenda. Kun hoped that the Soviet Russian government would intervene on Hungary's behalf and that a worldwide workers' revolution was imminent. Some may have believed that with the recent communist uprisings in Germany and the impending victory of Bolsheviks in Russia, the success of the world revolution would be assured. Right? In the meantime, the communist government resorted to arbitrary violence. Revolutionary tribunals ordered about 590 executions, including some for crimes against the revolution. The government also used their policy of collectivization to take grain from peasants. This violence and the regime's moves against the clergy shocked many Hungarians, and anti-communist opposition began to build, with some Hungarian nationalists and anti-communists moving into Austria to plan their next move. In late May, Kun attempted to fulfill his promise to restore Hungary's borders. The Hungarian Red Army, led by former Great War veterans, invaded Czechoslovakia, reoccupied part of Slovakia, and set up a puppet state known as the Slovak Soviet Republic. Despite this initial military success, however, Kun was forced to withdraw his troops and dismantle the Slovak Republic about 3 weeks later, when the French threatened to intervene during the Paris Peace Conference. This concession shook his popular support and crushed the Red Army's morale. Kun then turned the Hungarian Red Army on the Romanians to try and end the ongoing Hungarian-Romanian war in a communist victory. This backfired horribly though, because the Romanians broke through Hungarian lines on July 30, occupied and looted Budapest, and overthrew the Soviet Republic 1 day later. Kun fled first to Vienna and then to Soviet Russia, where he was later labelled as a Trotskyist sympathiser and executed during Stalin's purge of foreign communists in 1939. As for the rest of Hungary, nationalist and anti-communist elements would return to Hungary and initiate a White Terror purge which killed over 5,000 leftists and people sympathetic to the old communist regime. After Romanian forces pulled out of Hungary in 1920, Admiral Miklos Horthy would rise to power and become the official regent of the new Kingdom of Hungary. So, that's it then. To answer the question in the title, the reason why Hungary became communist after World War I was simply because of the instability of the country after the war ended. And with that answered, thank you for watching.